This video is brought to you by Auralic, makers of the Vega G2.1 streaming deck. Click to auralic.com for more information.
This is the latest David Bowie live release, recorded at the Phoenix Festival in the UK in '97, and I was there. And this is when Bowie was still doing fairly strange reinterpretations of older songs that he didn't play very often, like Quicksand, and I think he was doing Repetition around this time, although that's not on this set. And there's a very excellent sort of acoustic version of Gene Genie on here. And the first disc of this is currently sat in my CD player, the Hegel Mohican. That's going into a Hegel 390 amplifier, not the 590, the 390. And then the speakers. We need to talk about the speakers. What would you do if you were given the opportunity to audition at home a pair of loudspeakers from one of the world's most revered loudspeaker manufacturers? So revered that a number of stereophile reviewers use this company's speakers in the long term, on a long-term basis. So there's something to them, and I've never experienced them before. But what if that home audition was capped at 4 days? Would you still jump at the chance? And what if those speakers were really pretty darned expensive? Would you still leap then? Would you say yes? Because I was presented with this situation last Friday. We were planning to do a video about the Blue Sound Vault 2i. And my local dealer, I was just chatting to him about something else, and he said, do you want to just use the Wilsons in that video? And I was like, yes, I do. Because I was really curious as to how they sound. Now I know that some people might say no, because to experience something they could never afford makes some people a little bit angry, a little bit uncomfortable. But I don't know, I'm just not part of that group of people. I just want to try and experience as many things as possible. And as I always say, I'll try anything once. So for the last 3 days, I have been listening to the WILSON AUDIO TuneTot stand mount loudspeaker that you see behind me. They're in ivory white. I didn't have a lot of time to go digging into the specs and the details and the background of this loudspeaker because it only arrived on Friday and it's going back to the dealer this afternoon. But I did find out that it has a 1-inch tweeter, it's a fabric silk, it's doped, it's sealed at the rear, I believe, so it's in its own enclosure. And the mid-bass driver is 6 inches, it's doped paper, and it is vented at the rear. This is according to the WILSON AUDIO website. On the back, there is a port, but it's kind of hard to see because there's like this sort of baffle and it's sort of tucked underneath here. So it's almost sort of downward firing. So it's quite unusual in that respect. But I think Wilson did that because they're pitching this speaker at very wealthy people who can afford just to really put them in an office or in a bedroom. That's their promotional video says these things. But I see them as a very high-end stand mount for apartments like mine. One thing to note about these TuneTot is they also come with a base, which I didn't get because I just wanted to get one box crossed down. So that a base into which the spikes sit. So you can probably see the spikes on the bottom of the loudspeakers, and they're sat on stands that I always use. Atacama Nexus 6i, filled with Atabytes, with IsoAcoustics feet on the bottom. So obviously Wilson offer a bespoke stand with these loudspeakers if you want that. But because this was such a short notice thing, I just took the speakers and put them on the top. I didn't even take the spikes out because why? Now the price of these loudspeakers, I hope you're sitting down. They sell in Europe for roughly, I say roughly, 10,000 euros, which is the same price as roughly the Dutch and Dutch 8C, which I've had through here. That's about 2/3 of the price of a complete Key Audio 3 system. So it's not beyond the realms of things that I've done in the past, although I don't do them that often, mainly for expense reasons, because not everybody can really afford to spend 10 grand on a piece of hi-fi gear, but many people can. And if that's you, or you're just like looking at this just for fun, you're the kind of people I'm talking to. Now, price expectations can, in some people's minds, lead to base expectations. So whenever I tell some of my friends about like more expensive speakers like these, the first thing they ask me is like, I bet the bass is amazing. I bet they have lots of bass. And that's not true with these. I mean, it's a bit, that kind of thinking is a bit like, going to or reading about a Michelin-starred restaurant and thinking that it earned its star because it just serves unlimited amounts of food. You go to a Michelin-starred restaurant because the food is of very, very high quality, not because there's so much of it. And that's the same with the bass on these loudspeakers. So they only really go down to 65 Hertz, according to the manufacturer, which is not super low. So that means we don't get the real deep bass reach that we get from, say, the Bucart or the Key 3, the Key 3 is full range, the Bucart's almost full range. This is nowhere near full range. But the bass on these is exceptionally well textured. Probably some of the best textured bass I've ever heard from any loudspeaker. That's saying something. And it's really nicely controlled. It's just, I don't know, it's just like the perfect dessert serving, if you like. And that control, that word control, is something that I've kind of thought about many times over the weekend as I've been listening to these, because it's the control that these speakers give us elsewhere outside of the low frequency regions that really make them, really make them just a fantastic high-end loudspeaker. From the early noughties. This is M83's second album, I believe. This was before they went and became just like any other synth pop band. This is a little bit arty, a little bit glitchy. And I played this yesterday, and really the microdynamics that this pulls from the Wilsons, or the Wilsons pull from this, it's just exceptional. But, really well controlled. So when a sound sort of darts that way and then darts that way, it doesn't feel like it's out of control. It really feels like it's on a fairly tight leash, actually, which I thought was really interesting. I have to thank one of my readers for sending me this, because I've been after a CD copy of the KLF's Chill Out for a long time. It's quite hard to find. And this is an ambient classic. I'm not going to talk about it too much here because this is not a music review. But with the Wilsons, these are one of the few speakers, a bit like the Dutch and Dutch, a bit like the Key, that really sort of blow out the front wall. So you get like a proper sound stage that doesn't really feel connected to the speakers and goes a long way back to sort of give us the illusion that the front wall behind me doesn't really exist. And that's super impressive, especially from just like an ambient album like this, which has no real kick drum, but it's a bit like a fish tank. There are a lot of sort of sound sort of swimming around inside this record. And yeah, it's a good test album I think for sound staging in the mid-range and the top. Another electronic music album. Actually, no, this is an EP. This is a Boards of Canada EP. And what I really noticed from this through the Wilsons was a sense of tone. Very strong sense of tone. And even though it's electronic music, electronic sounds still have tone to them. And I guess I kind of wonder, is that because the crossover in here is so advanced? I guess you know, in a passive speaker that's selling for 10 grand, you would expect a very, very advanced crossover. I don't know, but I'm just sort of pontificating really. Now, one of my major beefs with many stand mounts is they have this sort of like mid-bass hump designed into them sometimes to give the illusion of more bass. Wilson haven't done that, and I really thank them for not doing that, because I don't like that sort of mid-bass hump, and especially with the work of Luna. And this is sort of indie music which has a very, on some tracks, a very strong sense of bass guitar, and that tends to trigger the mid-bass hump in many, many speakers, but not here. And also because I think the cabinet is so solid and so, I don't want to say inert, but maybe that is the word I'm looking for. I mean, these speakers weigh 13 kilos-ish each. It's pretty heavy. Many of you will know that as well as electronic music, I also listen to a lot of indie rock and post-punk. Now this band, McCluskey, are possibly the best band in the world, or were, sorry, when it comes to sort of that genre of music. And their song on here, To Hell With Good Intentions, I could make a case that it is the greatest song of all time. Now, if you're a Diana Krall type fan, you're going to hate it. You're just going to hate it. So don't even bother listening to it. But if you've got a more adventurous sort of streak in you, definitely give McCluskey Do Dallas a listen. And I mention this because this kind of music has very sharp edges. And through the Wilson, they're tamed a little bit, like they're a bit smoother. And I wondered whether that was because of the surrounds on the front of the speaker that wrap the tweeter to stop sort of edge diffraction, I'm guessing, I don't know, that make the tweeter sound very smooth. Or so I thought, because if a tweeter was super smooth, it would really erode the blat on horns. It would make it too smooth. You need a bit of sort of frisson to get the blat of horns right, like on this album, this compilation of spiritualized songs, but the Feel So Sad suite on here, which I've talked about before, has horn and woodwind, and the blat really came through. So I really thought maybe smooth is the wrong word. And then I guess really what I thought was maybe what I'm hearing that I enjoy so much from the TuneTot's tweeter is just a lack of distortion. Because all speakers, all of them, distort the signal. And some speakers just distort less than others. And maybe this is just a super low distortion loudspeaker. Which means, if we play World Party's Private Revolution, this is an 80s recording that is a bit thin sometimes. And on some systems, if you turn it up, you might want to turn it back down again because it kind of makes you wince. Not with these TuneTot. I started at a low volume because I thought, oh, this is going to be just too much. I turned it up a bit more, and then a bit more, and then a bit more. I thought, this is just fantastic. This is one of the key things to a really good loudspeaker, is that it makes you want to turn the volume up, not down. It was almost the first day of spring here yesterday, and I went for like almost a 20-kilometer walk with a friend. And I came back and I was pretty tired. So I thought I'd have a little nap on the couch. I thought I'll play some music, really low volume, like I normally do when I have a nap on the couch. It's not that often. And I played this. And this is Keiichi Suzuki's Satellite Serenade. But I didn't buy it for this. I bought it for probably the best Orb remix of all time, which is on here. It's like 15 minutes and starts with a David Attenborough sample. So I put this on, I was lying down, and normally what I do is I play it so quietly that it doesn't disturb me. But one thing I noticed from these Wilsons was that the clarity is so good, even at low volumes, that, I couldn't really sleep because half of my brain and my ear brain was latching on to what was going on with the speaker. I just couldn't ignore it. So I couldn't ignore them at low volumes. Now, I've heard loudspeakers come alive. This is one good thing about the Bucats, is they sort of come alive at low volumes because they're Fletcher-Munson curve correction. But that's more of a low-end thing. What I'm talking about here is more of a mid-range and treble thing, if you like. And in fact, I was just playing these just now for Olaf, played that Caliber Mark Anestis EP, and when the low end kicked in and the whole thing just seemed to open up, Olaf's eyes went, what? It was quite amusing, actually. They just, I don't want to say they throw such an expansive soundstage because that's such a horrible audiophile cliche, but the mid-range and the treble on them really kind of just opens up when the music calls for it and then comes back when it doesn't. So you get these strong dynamic contrasts. And also, I guess, you get tonal color shifts shown in greater, more abundant light. God, that sounded really pretentious, but whatever, But looking at all the CDs in front of me here, this is a sign, and this is actually what happened, is that these loudspeakers took me on a sort of musical rediscovery odyssey over the weekend. This is one of the few times that I can remember in the last 10 years actually, where I've got something in, because I get stuff in all the time, right? So it becomes like because it's a job, it's almost like a treadmill of gear that I have to sort of review or comment on. And I've got to say, yeah, the magic of receiving something new does fade. And it's not like Christmas every day that many people out there like to imagine. So it's quite rare for something really to grab me and force me to kind of almost compel me to go through my music collection going, I wonder what that sounds like with these, and I wonder what sounds like with these. And I know many of you will know this experience when you get new gear that excites you. And the TuneTot did that for me. Now, I will qualify this as maybe that was a function of the 4-day limit. I don't know, maybe. But yeah, I'm just processing all the kinds of ways and things I have to sell so I can afford to buy a pair of these. Because make no mistake, and I'm leaning in here, make no mistake, this is a very expensive passive loudspeaker, but this is also an incredible loudspeaker. Now, as much as my enthusiasm for this speaker is very, very strong, we should note that this is not a proper review, not only because I've only had them for a few days, but because I didn't compare them to anything else. So if I say a loudspeaker is absolutely fantastic, you would quite rightly say, compared to what? Like in the context of other 10 grand loudspeakers, where does this sit? I've no idea, because I don't have any other 10 grand loudspeakers. Because reviews that don't feature comparisons strip away the context into which products at any price point land. So even if this were a $500 DAC, you would quite rightly expect me to compare it to another $500 DAC. It's reasonable, right? Because if you're saying something is excellent, it's like, compared to what? And if you're asking me, well, how do these compare to the Key 3? I don't have the Key 3 anymore, so I can't give you that comparison. But I will say that these loudspeakers do sort of feature in a similar price point, because the loudspeakers are 10 grand, the Hegel amp is grand, and that's roughly the same price as the Key 3 system that I mentioned earlier. So we're in the same sort of financial ballpark. Obviously the Key go lower. I think the treble on here is much better. But that's me pulling from audio memory. That's not necessarily very reliable. So you have to take that not just with a pinch of salt, but with a whole fistful of salt. Because audio memory, like, oh, I heard this speaker at this show or this person's house 2 years ago, and then pulling that into a review in lieu of like in situ comparisons it's a cop-out. And I guess because I didn't have to do any comparisons, which take the most time to do, like if I was doing proper ABs, that's a week's worth of work easily. So because I didn't have to do that, like these speakers arrived late last week, we're making a video early the following week. Piece of cake to make a video without comparisons. So again, if I didn't do comparisons, I would be able to make far many more, just more of these videos. But I just think that would be selling myself short a little bit, and also not doing the right thing necessarily by you. If you like this video, please hit the like button down below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, in that I'm curious and I'm thirsty for new experiences like these, then please hit the subscribe button. And thank you, as always, for watching. I didn't do that right, did I? No, it's thank you ever so much for watching.